Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Hopelessly Gifted podcast. I'm your host, Mark Talaga, and today we have a wonderful guest, a good friend and colleague of mine. Jillian Gismondi is here with us today. I'm very excited. And so what I've been doing in my more recent episodes is I'm trying to have people come on that have burning questions around the gifted. This one thing, this niggling little thought that doesn't seem to have an answer to it that they can find anywhere, or it's still creating lots of confusion among parents, families, and kids themselves. And so let me go ahead and introduce Jillian here. So Jillian has focused her work with children, adolescents, and their families for the past 20 years. Jillian provided evidence-based practices anchored in care, support, and validation to her clients. She has worked in both the public and private sector. For the past 7 years, Jillian has worked at Child and Family Solutions Center in Farmington Hills. Jillian wears 2 hats at CFSC, in which she provides direct care, along with being the practice development lead. Jillian specializes in neurodiversity, life adjustments, school concerns, anxiety, and parent coaching. Welcome, Jillian.
Thank you, Mark.
All right. So it's great to have you. You and I have known each other for a couple of years now and worked alongside one another. And I know you have a special interest in working with the neurodivergent, gifted, asynchronous, complex, whatever you want to call them, population, right?
Yes, the quirky kids, as I like to call them,
Yeah,
lovingly.
That's right. Yeah, the quirky kids.
Yeah.
So, which a lot of our listeners will relate to immediately. So yeah, today I really wanted just to jump in to what is this burning question, this thing that seems to be coming up with parents and families that you're working with.
Sure, absolutely. Time and time again, I hear parents say to me, why does it feel like my gifted child is manipulating me? Or I will hear things like, they're either going to be a Marvel supervillain or they're going to rule the world. I'm not sure which one. And
Ooh, I like that.
Isn't that good?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, A+ for creativity with my parents.
You know, it's funny. Our logo that I had designed for the Center for Identity Potential, I had one of my kids come in and say, it kind of looks like you're like a headquarters for supervillains. And I looked at the kid, I'm like, we kind of are. Like, that's exactly what we're doing here. So you're right on the money with that. But yeah, it feels that this manipulation piece seems to be, it exists in all kids, obviously, but especially prevalent in the gifted. So I'm going to start with you, honestly, Julie. What do you think that's about? Like, where does your mind go when you hear that term, and how do you understand that issue?
Yes, I don't really like that term manipulated because it has such a negative connotation. And manipulation can be used for good also. And I also understand parents feel so frustrated and they're using manipulated because they feel like they don't have a level ground sometimes with their child because that child's finding that angle that they wouldn't have even thought of. And it
Oh,
can,
for sure.
and I think it makes a parent feel great that, wow, my child's that bright. This is amazing. And oh my goodness, they're going to take over this whole household if I don't watch it.
Right. And so I think the part I'm latching on to is the word has a connotation to it, a stigma to it. I like what you said. Manipulation can be positive. I mean, I don't know if I'm, telling tales outside of school, but therapists, guess what? We sometimes manipulate in order to help our clients. And I'll own that. I'm going to be kind of manipulative to say, look, I've got to get you to a place where you're more flexible, open-minded, and I might use a little trickery and wizardry to get you there. But with the right intention, right, yeah. With the right intention, though, that's done and it's perfectly fine and everybody would agree that's okay. But when parents are saying they're being manipulated by kids, I always get this image of they feel like they're losing a battle, right? They're trying to put in place boundaries or limits, and somehow or some way that kid is figuring out how to get around it or how to put it back on the parent to feel like they're not, in the right anymore. Would you agree?
I would agree. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So, it's kind of like you got to get down into what are parents really struggling with in this moment? What do they really want? Do they want their kid to be less manipulative? I don't know. Probably not. What do you think they really want?
I think for many of them, they want to feel like they have a sense of control over the household.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, I also hear that manipulation word with screen time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
especially with neurodiverse clients and gifted clients. It's like the trifecta.
Oh, absolutely. It is so much more. Yeah, again, and that's a big part of my work is working with video. I'm a former video game professional. And so a lot of my work is around screen time. And that is a big area of the manipulation. And so, but I'm going to go back to what you said in the beginning, where you said
Mm-hmm.
there's a sense of the parents want to have like some semblance of control.
Mm-hmm.
And again, even that word can be, seen in a negative light, right? Oh, you're trying to be controlling and you're trying to control the child. And I don't know. For me, it's like there's a hierarchy in the household,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is my personal belief. This is what I teach people, that the hierarchy is, parents are benevolent dictators.
Right.
They are in charge. They get to set the limits. They get to describe what the rules in the household are. And children are there not to, in my opinion, have an equal seat at the table to also say, well, my opinion is just as important as yours. Not that it isn't, but it's more like parents set the rules and kids figure out how to work within those rules. And then you have a really smart kid who is trying to say, I don't like that rule. And so I'm going to find any little way around it that I can. And so parents feel like, when we set boundaries, it doesn't work. When we set limits, it doesn't work. And what I would say to them is you're probably doing it in more of a normative way than you think. Meaning, I have no problem with parents going to the nth degree and hiring the geek squad or getting a safe with a lock that they only know in order to maintain the boundaries and limits.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is that out of line? Maybe that's a little over the top.
No, I think that's fair. I'm going to add to it also that
Yeah.
I like to also validate the children's thoughts regarding a rule. It doesn't mean that rule is going to change, but go ahead.
Right.
Well, we are more than open to hear what you have to say about it, with the caveat of it still may be the rule of the house.
Right. Right.
You know,
And that's the challenge for the kid, right? You have this rule in your home.
mm-hmm.
And what's that like for you? What does that feel like for you that your parents are as strict as you say they are? Because then you bring it back to what they're really being challenged with. They want to make it about the rule. The rule is dumb, and I can prove how it's dumb because I've been on Wikipedia and I've deep dived into this and I watched 10 YouTubes that say it's dumb, but it's rather you're having a challenge with your parents setting a limit. And what's that really about? That's I like what you're saying. You're validating that it's having an effect on them.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I will even tell the client, you know what, make a presentation for your parents. To your point, right? Do some research, toss it out a couple slides, present it to mom and dad, see what they say.
Oh, absolutely. See, I love that because on some level, it's like a multiply embedded message. You're having them take ownership of doing the work of what it takes to create what they want, rather than just throw a tantrum, be real sneaky about it, hide it in their room and try to get away with it. You're saying, hey, deal with the problem head on.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, it's not really manipulation anymore. It's more like, these benevolent dictators will hear you out. And if you have some points, maybe we alter things and adjust things, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Or we may not, too.
Or we may not. That's the other piece. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Where do you feel like parents particularly get in trouble or start to experience more stress around this problem?
I would go back to screens.
Okay.
Without a doubt. And then I'd say second to screens would be transitioning in the morning, whether it's school or a camp or a job, whatever that X factor is, it ends up being a power struggle.
Gotcha. Yeah, let's talk about screens. I got a lot of thoughts about screens. and this might be for another episode entirely, but, the idea is we got to look at whatever the behavior is. We can look at it as, why are they so dependent, whatever you want to call it, on screens, or why do they fight against the transition in the morning routine, right? You got to look at why that's happening with asynchronous gifted kids. And I'd throw it to you. What are your thoughts on why that's happening or why that's there?
I think for especially the younger ones, which is the group that I work with the most, those lower elementary school kids, it's a fear of back to control. There's a loss of control. I'm headed to school. I don't know what's going to happen, which could bring about some anxiety. And for many of these kids, home is their safe place. And when they have to move into maybe a world in which they feel more anxious or they have less control, it brings about that anger and then that power struggle and alleged manipulation.
Well, I like what you're talking about because it's the emotional aspect, the anxiety of it all, the feeling of safety versus not feeling safe. And I'd put another layer on top of it because you're dealing with the future of what is school going to present. But then it's kind of, I wouldn't say that, oh, I'm not going to brush my teeth or get ready or eat breakfast because I purely just want to delay the inevitable. I think there's also this challenge, this executive function demand issue, a skill issue on top of that, that's just adding fuel to the fire. I'm sure you see that with your clients.
I am seeing that, and I'm seeing it more and more, especially that PDA, even though we're not really using it as a diagnosis yet.
Well, explain to people what PDA is.
Sure, that demand avoidance. And if there's any demand that's put in front of you, to your point, brushing your teeth, washing your face, putting on 2 socks, not just one.
Yeah.
Now we're putting on our pants, right? And
yeah, I love that.
That is a demand. There is I call it a guttural response from some of our clients that you're asking them to push a heavy boulder up a hill and it's not possible, even though the adult is looking at it as it's just a sock. Please just put your sock on. We're going to be late.
Right. It's just a sock. Now here, okay, this is where I think it gets interesting because this is when it starts to get labeled as manipulation. Or this is where it's tricky to determine what is manipulation and what is a legitimate lack or underdevelopment of skill. Well, I've seen you put on socks, so I know you can do it. And when you don't do it, that means you're manipulating us and making me angry and da-da-da-da-da, right? However,
we just pulled that thread at that point.
Yeah. And what is then, what else is going on? Because in our line of work, we have to assess for everything. So I'm looking at, did that kid eat or not? How much sleep did that kid get? Is there something particularly going on in school to where if there is enough anxiety and enough overwhelm, the prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain, the frontal lobe, where executive functioning is housed, can be completely overloaded. And something as simple as brushing teeth, putting on 2 socks instead of 1, actually does become difficult, if not impossible, for certain kids. And so what we try to train parents to do is evaluate, is this really manipulation? Are they, pulling one on me because they're trying to just, get under my skin? Or on some level, is there a real struggle that needs a little bit more explanation? And I think that's really when we talk about demand avoidance, I like to say there's a reason they're avoiding it. And it's not pure manipulation. It's not fear of failure. It's not fear of whatever. There is a dilemma that's getting created around the kid attempting to do a task or meet their responsibilities, right? The responsibility of going to school, of getting there on time, things like that. And for a lot of gifted kids who are brilliant and know exactly what they're supposed to do intellectually, but they can't conjure it up and execute on it, this dilemma occurs. And then parents get frustrated and angry and they're mad because the kid seems to be manipulating. And so I guess you're right. We're pulling that thread, right? We're making it a little bit more complicated, but I think it needs to be more complicated.
Absolutely. I think for most of these kids, we can't just look at it from the surface level. We have to do a chain analysis as to what else has gone on for this child. And also, because I do a lot of parent work, it's what's going on for the parent too. Is the parent being triggered by this? And dig a little bit into their background.
Oh, absolutely, because there's value systems associated with it, right? Well, when I grew up, my dad would have never let me do what you just getting away with. And all of a sudden, we're having these, intrinsic values that have been bestowed upon us by our parents. Thanks, mom and dad. And they're coming out and can be a form of projection onto the kid. And again, this is all normal stuff, by the way. Everybody does this. This isn't like, oh, you're not doing a good job if this is happening. It happens to everybody. Our job as therapists is to make sure you're really aware of where all it's coming from and help you explore it from all angles so that you have a better sense of what the real problem set is that you're trying to solve. A lot of times we focus on the symptoms. Well, you're getting over emotional around your kids and you just need to find a way to chill out and go have a cup of coffee. That's fine. I mean, I do that from time to time. But it's more of what else is a part of this? What else are you missing? And where else do you need to adjust for this specific, unique, gifted kid? Because remember, giftedness is just regular, normal human development in extremes, right?
Yes. Yep. And I frame to a lot of my parents the giftedness. Oh, my child's gifted. Well, being gifted isn't necessarily a gift. There's a lot that comes along with it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I think it was. Oh gosh, I always forget her name. I'll have to come back to it and reference it in a future episode. There's a book, If This Is a Gift, Can I Send It Back? Right, about gifted kids.
That's great.
Yeah,
Jen,
I can't remember.
Yes.
Yeah, because
it's a challenge.
It is. It is a challenge. It is an extreme challenge. And the more people try to rely on what it's supposed to look like, what the normative says you should do. Well, you got to be tougher on them. You can't let them take advantage of you. They're manipulating you and you're, just letting them walk all over you. I steer people away from that immediately because it is far more complicated, far more exacting and difficult than most people realize. And when you do dig in deeper and add in more variables, you start to have that aha moment of, oh, no wonder. Imagine you got a kid who has just horrific auditory processing, meaning you say something, you can get a sense that they heard words, but they did not on any level process it. And then imagine that kid who has a little bit of anxiety around school and has just been given 5 instructions of what to do in the morning. And they do none of it because it never got processed. They didn't, and they say, you didn't say that. And now they're being accused of being a liar. And all of a sudden everybody's getting mad and it's manipulation. And rather than this kid really struggles to take in auditory information, process it effectively, and then convert it to execution. So how do we deal with that problem?
Right. And it's also, to your point, it's not a rubber stamp for every child. To your point with the auditory processing child, they may not have heard it. Sure, it may have come out of a parent's mouth. Absolutely. But if they're not hearing it, to them, it didn't happen. And if we're just circling the drain every single morning with this, and we're not making changes, we're damaging relationships in the home.
Oh, that now you're preaching, because that's the big one. When your relationships start to suffer and it starts to become, I always feel for parents when it feels like they're, feeling like they need to run a boot camp or, a psych ward for some of them. I think, it can feel like it's this unbelievable demand where the relationship of just being that kid's mom or dad and that kid just being a son or daughter gets thrown out the window because there's so much focus on, things need to look in a certain way and we just can't get there. And that's always really tough.
And I think it's sad too, because you're losing part of that relationship and that special bond with your child. To your point, you feel like you're running the psych hospital or the boot camp. What happened to just being and having that special time?
Right. And so for the parents out there that say, yeah, I'd love that. Of course I'd love that. What I would say to you is that if it's really that difficult and it really feels like that for you, and I'm sure there are parents out there that are like, yep, that's me. I would say pretty bluntly, you're probably missing something. There's more going on. And on some level, you do need that understanding of how asynchronous development really works, on how a kid can be brilliant but really struggle, on what it really means to develop skill in gifted kids who seem like they should just be able to get anything right away. And And as you unravel that yarn a little bit more and more, you'll get more traction around what it is you need in order to adjust for the variance of a gifted child.
Mm-hmm. I think also throwing those shoulds out the window.
Oh yeah.
You have a gifted child. What the person next door does, it's probably not going to work for your child. And when you
No.
stop comparing and stop shoulding and just creating an atmosphere that works best within your home for your child while maintaining, accountability, responsibility, helping your child be the best person they can be, that's when everyone's going to start to thrive.
Oh yeah. And how tough is it, for parents that even like, let's say they get that intellectually.
Mm-hmm.
I know that my kid's different and I have to do things different. But then they have parents or in-laws or, like you said, neighbors or school teachers and all these other systems that are looking at you like you're nuts, like you're coddling or doing this kid a disservice. Or that's really hard. That's really hard. And really for me, and maybe you can offer up some insight as well, the only antidote I've really found for parents is when they understand this stuff so concretely and they get how the brain works and they get how processing works and they get how asynchrony works, and it's really in their bones, that and they can start to educate others, is the only time they really feel like they're free of those shoulds.
Yes, I would agree. And especially when they can feel empowered to be a cheerleader and to push the
Yeah.
information out there, whether it's to the schools or, to in-laws or extended families. I think that's when they really can shine as parents
Yeah.
and know I'm doing something for my child. And for a lot of these parents too, I recommend parent coaching or parent support. It is very challenging and unique to parent a gifted child. And there's nothing wrong with you for saying, I need extra help. If you had a heart issue, would you go to the cardiologist or would you ignore it? Mental
Right.
health is the same
Exactly.
way. If you're
Yeah.
feeling this extra stress, if you just want someone who's not within your family or friend group to talk to, a therapist can really help manage that stress.
Absolutely. And if you get somebody, yeah, and everybody needs a Jillian in their life who is there
And a
to
Mark.
support them. Yeah, that's right. We're here for you guys.
Yeah.
It's like, I get a lot of questions a lot of the time because there is no handbook on this stuff, right? Especially with gifted. And again, gifted is different. You got to deal with it. That's part of the title of the podcast, Hopelessly Gifted. You are, whether you like it or not. It's okay. But they say, oh, where's the book on how I deal with my gifted kid? And for me, it's like there is no book, because anybody that says, oh, here's how you deal with gifted kids, this is what works for all gifted kids, they're nuts. They're out of their mind, because that's
Agreed.
not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Every kid is different. And that's why there's not really a book. You can understand foundational pieces of these puzzles, but your child and your parenting technique and where you come from and your value systems are very unique. And you need somebody that can work within all that to create, whatever solutions, frameworks, you need to survive,
Mm-hmm.
to
And
thrive.
again, right. And it's what works for your family system.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. But it can be exceedingly difficult. And so again, you're not alone. But again, I go back to like in the 80s and 70s, there were like everybody took parenting classes. Everybody, there was huge, I can't remember the name of it right now. It starts with an S, but
Was it Spock?
there was, yeah.
No.
Yes.
Right?
Well, no, Spock was
right.
the kind of the guru.
Yeah, but there was.
It's actually, there was a certain kind of class. Yeah, we'll come up with it, or somebody just email us. Right. But there was a certain program that was just throughout the country that people went to, and they learned these very basic foundational things. We don't really have that anymore. It's all very ad hoc, piecemeal, Facebook groups, which all can be very valuable, by the way. You do need to find your support wherever you can find it. But I like to kind of get rid of the stigma of, you may be the smartest person in the world. Doesn't mean you know exactly everything you need to know about how to help yourself and help these kids in a way that's going to be more successful than what you're doing. Because if you're pulling your hair out every day, again, you're missing something. That's all. There's more data to be uncovered. And sometimes you need somebody that knows where to look and how to apply it to your context in life to help with that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And to nudge you in the right direction, too.
Yeah, right. Because manipulation, again, needs to be seen as, okay, I got a bright kid. And this bright kid, instead of relying on some maybe more appropriate skill sets to get what they want, are over relying on these strengths of theirs, maladaptively, but these strengths of theirs to get what they want. They're relying on their reasoning, their high level verbal precocity, and these areas where you look at it and be like, man, yeah, are you a supervillain or a superhero? Because you could go either way.
And you could go either way depending on the day or the time of day,
Yeah.
or which way the crow's flying, right? Like there's so many
Yep.
variables here.
Yes. But if you look at it as its potential, and its potential to be a person that can, create change in certain ways, but they're missing these very foundational skills of really figuring out how they get what they want. Because again, you tell a kid, hey, go put a presentation together. They're going to have to face more of the reality of where their skill deficits are through that exercise, which is a good way to do that, than by just kind of beating them down or just pulling your hair out or, whatever. So you've got to look at it as, okay, this kid has no awareness that they are manipulating in a sense, and that they're over relying on certain things that are just easier for them, right? And that goes back to the avoidance. What are they avoiding? Well, they're avoiding their vulnerability, an area where they're not really developed, and they don't like the idea that they're not really developed there.
And all of us, whether you're gifted or not, we want to avoid our weaknesses. We do all have them. None of us want to admit it, yet we do all have weaknesses, and you want to push out your strengths.
I absolutely. One of the hardest parts about working in the practice that we work in is working with my mentor and the founder of the center, Andy Mahoney, because he is he does it in the best way possible, but he will critique you. You will think you're doing an incredible job with a client, and then you bring it up and he'll be like, well, you're missing this. Why didn't you do this? What are you doing with, and again, I have such a relationship with him that he can say that, but I will tell you, it was one of the hardest things for me to do is have my ego survive that level of, you are missing things. You have vulnerabilities. There are things that you grew up on that you have no control over that are causing you to react in a way that's actually not helping your client. And now I can be thankful for that process, but boy, oh boy, people don't want to go through it.
No, it sounds like it was a rough one.
Oh, that'd be a rough one. We do it every week. It's no, it's, but it's so valuable. And again, it's just, I'm trying to validate that it's hard for parents to have to come to this place of, are you really going to tell me what I'm doing wrong? I'm really trying my best here. And it is a fight day after day. And it's like, no, I don't want you to feel bad. I don't want you to feel guilt, but I do want to arm you with the idea that you can grow and we can get better, and it's okay to want more, so you can get back to that place where the relationship is back on track and you get to be mom or dad and they get to be kid,
Mm-hmm. And within that, with a lot of my parent support sessions, I will even have families share what went well that week, or tell me something funny that your child did. Because again, along with your point, you don't want them to feel like, okay, now I'm the professional and I know everything. Well, I don't know everything. I'm learning every day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to help you. And we don't want to just talk about the negative or the struggles. Let's talk about what went really well and build off of that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, that's the strength-based approach of making sure you are not missing the value you're bringing. Because sometimes parents miss the value they are just by being in the same room with their kid. They don't realize how effective they are just with their presence or just with the natural things that they do without even thinking. And you have to highlight that as well. Hey, now, I think something you're missing is what you're doing really, really well with this kid and how much he relies on you. And on some level, if you go back to a kid, let's go back to the morning routine or the ability to, regulate themselves around screens or something. There comes a point where they may not have that skill set at all at that certain age, that certain stage of development in their life. And it is more than okay for you to do it for them, whatever that is. Put in the limits, help them get dressed. I truly believe that, because parents get so worried of like, oh, am I creating this level of dependence and they're going to be dependent on me forever? Not in the context of where they're at developmentally. You start where they are. If they don't have that skill, you need to be that person in their life that says, hey, I got you. I'm not going to force you to get there just yet. We'll work on this later when you're a little more ready, you know? And parents need to have that freedom to realize that their caringness and their strength and, you know, attending to a kid's vulnerability is priceless. And you don't want to miss that either.
No, and then also with that asynchronous development, even if your child is 9, it doesn't mean that emotionally they're 9. So what other kids may be able to do, your gifted 9-year-old may not be there.
Yes. Oh, that's such a, I got to highlight that because you are 100% right. Hold on, let me take a break. Chronology doesn't matter in the world of gifted development. You could be 10 years old and not know how to ride a bike. And parents might be like, he's the only kid that doesn't know how to ride a bike. To which I reply, first and foremost, who cares? Because I don't put judgment on, you know, when they should or shouldn't do something. But if you look back to asynchronous development, you know, are their fine and gross motor skills delayed? Is it so much harder for them to have that ability because of certain areas of lag in development? And so, no, we can't put an age on certain tasks and things. You're 100% right, whether that's emotional underdevelopment or physical underdevelopment, whatever it is. You've got to get out of that paradigm that there's certain markers that must be met at certain times.
And then also for the parents, okay, to the bike example, my child's the only one on the block not riding the bike. Well, do they want to, or are you the one who wants them to?
Yes. Now, and here's the litmus test you can do with your kids to determine that. You might not always get a straight answer, but the idea is if you go to them and say, does it bother you on any level that you're not able to ride a bike? If they go, nope, don't care, then they probably don't. If they go, yeah, it bothers me a little, then you reframe that and say, well, that means you have potential to do it. Because if it bothers you that you're not able to do it, it means on some level internally, you know you got this and you want to be able to do it, but you don't have the ability to execute yet. And so we're going to help you figure out what might be missing. You know, and so I always say that if a kid is, you know, feeling like they're, you know, do you wish you were a better writer? Yeah, I mean, yeah, I wish I could. It's like, well, you might have potential in it. So we don't want to throw it out. But I like what you're saying is, do they want to? Is it a part of who they are? Or is it a projection of embarrassment or shame or, you know, something that came from your great-great-grandmother? I don't know. We got to evaluate.
Right. Absolutely. Because again, each of these children are so unique.
Yes. Yeah. And so, you know, to bring it back to the idea of, you know, my kid's manipulating or it feels like they're manipulating, you've got to look at, you know, there's a purpose to all behavior. So they're doing it for a reason. And don't jump to the most immediate thing. Well, they just don't want to do something. Got to go even farther. Okay, well, they don't want to do something for a reason. There's something that's a challenge to them. There's something that's getting in the way. There's something they're struggling with. And your unique child is having a specific area of vulnerability around whatever it is. Because typically, kids want to do well in everything. They want to do well in school. They want to be liked by their teachers. They want to not make mom and dad go crazy sometimes. Maybe sometimes they just do.
Maybe 70-30.
Yeah, it's a 70-30 split for sure.
Yeah.
But it's okay to say, you know what? Everything I've tried hasn't really moved the dial. It's possible we're missing something. It's possible we need somebody who gets these kids to help us broaden out our horizon of what we need to be looking at outside of what we've already tried.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes also for parents, especially with the morning routines, if your child is late once or twice because you've pulled them out of that situation and sat down and talked to them, instead of demanding that the sock must be on right now and we're going to school, that's going to hold so much more weight to that child.
Yes.
That their vulnerability was explored instead of ignored. And then we go to school, mom or dad are going to work and they're upset. You're going to school dysregulated. It's not starting anyone's day off in a healthy manner.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's really great. You know, I I really appreciate you sharing that, because that is such an important point about where's the real priority here. What are we really trying to do? We're trying to develop kids. We're trying to create these relationships. And yes, sometimes being late might be okay. I love
It
that.
is. You'll get a pass. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Jillian, I really appreciate you being on the show with us. This has been really fun to talk with you about these things. Any final thoughts or anything you'd like to share or want parents to know or keep in mind as we start to wrap up?
Yeah, I think it's just really important for me to reinforce it's okay to ask for help. And you have this wonderful child who's so unique. And a lot of times parents need that support just as much as the children need the support. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you or you're a, quote, bad parent. Like, we're here to support and to help navigate and help your kid be the best kid you can be.
I love it. That's great. It takes a village.
Yes.
And where can people find you if they're looking to get in contact with you?
Sure. So they can find me at Child and Family Solutions Center in Farmington Hills. My phone number and email are listed on the website.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening. This has been another episode of Hopelessly Gifted, and I hope to hear from you guys again. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.